And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Steve Anderson. Steve has spent over 35 years shaping the insurance industry through a deep understanding of emerging technologies and how businesses today can best integrate and leverage them. He's a sought-after speaker and influencer. He's also the author of the widely anticipated book, The Bezos Letters, which reveals 14 principles for business growth based on the ideas and patterns that emerged when he examined Jeff Bezos' 21 annual letters to shareholders. He has spoken in, I think, every state in the
I
union,
have, yes.
as well as other places. So, welcome aboard, Steve. How are you today?
Well, thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me.
So, every state. So I was going to say, and you spoke in both Missouri and Kansas, right?
I
To
have,
both of those states.
yes, and
There you
South
go.
Dakota and North
Both
Dakota.
Dakotas. But most people don't double Dakota. So anyway, so let's dive in. So you sort of come at this in a little bit different than many of the folks that we have, given that you've got this deep domain expertise, right? So the domain expertise that you have comes from the insurance business.
Correct.
And then now you've got the Bezos piece. How did you go from sort of the domain expertise to Bezos, and why did you pick insurance? Because some people struggle where they start in terms of finding a lane.
Yeah, so I mean, I started in insurance. I've been working in that industry for about 40 years now in various capacities, selling primarily on the distribution side, so agents and brokers. Last 20 years, I have been focused on how technology impacts the industry. So part of that was researching what's coming, what to pay attention to, what agents and brokers needed to implement within their own organizations. And so I would do research, writing, speaking, workshops around those topics and a wide range from database systems to websites to, social platforms, right? All kind of, I would call the normal things. A little bit of a twist, though, was also helping those agents and brokers understand how technology was potentially impacting their clients and causing insurance questions and issues. So, coverage and some of those kinds of things. So that background led me to really looking probably about 3 or 4 years ago, a work group within the industry that I was a co-chairman of called the Changing Nature of Risk. So we were really looking at how risk was changing.
Okay.
And that led me to this idea that because technology is changing so rapidly, businesses don't have the time they used to have to examine and look and okay, what's this new thing going to do to us? How is it going to impact us? So the biggest risk is actually not taking enough risk. And so that started me on a journey of looking at companies that didn't make transitions well. And we certainly know some of those names between Kodak and BlackBerry and now Sears and I mean a whole bunch of different companies. And also those companies that actually have made those transitions well. That led me to Amazon. That led me to really doing a deep dive into, okay, how did they do it? What's different? Which led me to the shareholder letters. And so the book is an examination of the now 21 letters to shareholders that Jeff Bezos has written starting in 1997, and really a deep dive examination. And through that process, I came up with what I call 14 growth principles that I believe any business can use to grow like Amazon.
So clearly, the principles that you extracted from examining the Amazon letters have more or have a broader reach or a broader application than your work in the insurance universe. Is that correct?
That is correct. Certainly applies to that industry, but also I believe, and this is kind of the journey I realized in that. Okay, these are principles that actually apply to not just businesses either, but nonprofits and other types of organizations that they may be able to look at and use.
Sure. So, given that, what, if anything, have you or are you going to be doing differently with your business in terms of the types of clients that you serve, in terms of how you serve them, from modalities and such? So, how does it potentially change the face of the business for you?
Well, so one of the reasons for even considering writing a book in the first place was the idea that I wanted to pivot to a wider audience. So my niche, that has been very good to me, but was very narrow focused. It was insurance agents and brokers in the United States, primarily, some in Canada, but primarily the United States. And I felt I had reached a plateau there in terms of both income, speaking fees, and things like that, as well as impact and breadth. And as and I'd gotten a lot of encouragement in terms around the concept of the book, and realized that it would provide me a different platform, certainly from more of a keynote than a workshop speaker, as well as helping businesses think through, okay, what does this invention look like?
So let me ask you something there, Steve. Let me pause you there if I could for a moment.
Sure.
So, so it sounds like there's sort of two things going on at once here, which I love, which is, hey, you're incredibly successful in the insurance market, but it has its own limitations, its own glass ceiling, if you will, and you didn't think there was much more to go there. Which, listen, you stay in one industry for a long time. That's a hashtag good problem, but a problem nonetheless.
Yes.
So then you decide, in order to break through that, the book is going to be sort of my transition, my crossover, right? Is that so? It was pretty deliberate to say, let me pick a
Yeah,
topic.
it ended
No.
up being that. It didn't start
Okay.
that way, but absolutely ended up being that. And the book looks at, experimentation, invention, and innovation through the lens of risk taking. So I've been able to use all of my insurance, risk management background and what I've worked on for many years, but use it in a different way. And I think certainly what I'm starting to hear is people are thinking differently about their business and the risks they need to take and how they need to be intentional. So I'm abandoning what I've done. It's just now broadening it a bit out to a wider audience.
Got it. And how long has the book been out?
Book was published last fall, so not very long, about 6 months now, maybe
Okay.
5.
So what doors do you see it? And it may be too early to tell, but any indication or any thoughts around doors that it might be opening for you that would not have been opened before, opportunities that you're at least in the running for that you wouldn't have been on a client's radar before. What do you see changing, and what do you anticipate will change more?
So I'm going to answer that first by giving you a little bit more about the book and what's happening there. So Wall Street Journal, USA Today
Congrats. Good
bestsellers
stuff.
last fall. So that's obviously great, right? And it's been licensed to translate and publish in 13 countries.
Okay.
And so the international interest is well, we're all surprised. I guess I'll say it
Sure.
that way. Pleasantly, obviously. So, what that is opening up is both domestic and international opportunities for me to be a keynote speaker. So, I've already gotten so far this year, actually, I've done, I think, two or three of them, and been booked for keynote at a rate more than three times my prior highest rate.
Well, let's rewind the tape on that again. So you've got three gigs. So you've been doing.
I've
You're
gotten
not
actually
new in the game,
keynote gigs.
right? You've been doing this for 30 years, and now you're able to four gigs at three times your previous rate.
Correct. Actually paid too, not just
Wow.
yeah. So that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
And
Even better. The checks are
yes,
clearing.
and
That's incredibly significant. So I would say the book is probably paid for itself fairly quick.
so what you asked about it, what do I anticipate? I anticipate the international. So it's already been published in Korea, Japan, Taiwan, India, interestingly enough, and Russia. So, again, takes a little time for that to work its way through and people to see it and et cetera. So that's what I'm anticipating. And actually, Peter, I am working, how do I say this? I have hired a couple of coaches and I've been speaking for 25 years, but I've hired a couple of speaking coaches
Yeah.
so that my keynote is worthy of those rates. That's the way I like to say it. So better stage presence, more tight in the terms of my topic, making sure I, deliver the value and actionable items, because I don't want to be kind of the guy that, yeah, I got that, but nobody liked it, and so it's not a long-term solution.
Got it. Got it. So do you anticipate that in the next, I don't know, pick a period of time, 6 months, 18 months, whatever, you'll be doing, a fraction of the insurance work, your core work for 30 years based on sort of the trajectory of where this is going?
I do. And what that percentage is, I don't know. Right now in my mind, I'll probably still do, 40-ish percent in the insurance arena. But most of my time, I'm hoping at least, right? That's the hope with all of this will be spent in this area, and both certainly Keynote, but I also am developing and building out in corporate training. So if somebody wants and actually last week I was brought into a large regional insurance company to address their senior leadership and board of directors, about 45 people in the room. And then that may lead to, okay, we want our other staff, our other departments to be able to hear this and more longer training in terms of workshop and some things like that.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. Do you see opportunity to go back to your previous market with sort of the new stuff, right? So go back to some of your insurance
Yes.
clients and say, "Hey, I have this, I have this new thing I'm doing, etc." And would they support it at the new rate or the new rate ish?
Well, interestingly, I didn't think that was going to be possible because I thought I was pretty well pegged as the workshop guy, at a certain rate. And actually, one of the four that has been booked is a keynote in the industry at the higher rate. So that
Fantastic.
surprised me a little bit in terms of being able to at least initially make some of that transition. And again,
That's fantastic.
it helps when you have a Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and international bestseller. I mean, so it's a
Doesn't
good
hurt.
book. I'm prejudiced, but it's a good book. The reviews have been great. I think on Amazon we have 4.8 stars and about 60 or 65
Fantastic.
reviews. So it helps that it's a good book.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I mean, you almost it's a given that you write a book that's amazing, right? Which you just, it's the Lake Wobegon effect. Most books are
Yes,
average, but clearly you wrote a book that resonated and you put the work in and you got to market it properly and all the things that need to be done, which takes a massive amount of work. I want to talk about sort of these new markets that you're going into. How different is the way that you sell, the way that they interact with you, the way that all that happens? Is it harder, easier, the same?
I guess so. I'm going to separate that into speaking and then consulting. So in the speaking,
Yes.
I've been fortunate to find a very good speaker manager, and so she handles all the negotiation and contract and all those types of things, and is very good at positioning well.
Now that's new though. That's a new wrinkle.
That's a relatively new for me. Yeah, most of the time I would book my own stuff.
Okay, so now you're able to afford to have a manager because you probably couldn't do that on the previous rate structure.
Correct.
Or you did,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So cool. So
Correct.
it takes a bit of the monkey off your back in terms of negotiations and contracting and all the necessary evil that goes into the transaction.
All the stuff
Yeah.
is that I'm not very good at. So yeah, and I don't have to worry about.
So that's cool. That's great.
So that's a benefit, obviously. And then the structure of the book, kind of around 14 principles, and there are 4 cycles. So there's a really interesting structure there in terms of if you want to go deeper, we can, and that may be a 1-day workshop or a 2-day whatever. So I'm building out the back end to the speaking, and so yeah, here's the 90-minute version, but if you really want to go deeper and actually see how to make these happen in your own organization, then we can do, other things to follow up.
And that lines up to, like you said, the principles and the chapters and all that. So somebody can go deep, a little bit deeper, or fully immersive, which is more opportunity for you.
Correct.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. What if anything would you, and I don't know if there's anything, but I'll ask the question anyway. What would you have done differently? I mean, the book hit all the lists. The book is great. It's transformed your business. It looks like the trajectory is amazing. But anything you might have done differently in retrospect?
So kind of in the book launch last fall, I would say, I'm trying to think how to phrase it. There are some technical differences or changes I would make. So, kind of the book launch, obviously, so it worked, right? We got on a couple lists and, the foreign rights and right, all of that kind of stuff. I will say that the traction or the sales in the US have not been as large as I would expect given everything. And so I don't know if that was us not doing enough on the book launch. I don't know actually, and we've talked about this, if it's just a reaction against Amazon. You certainly hear a lot, right, politically, and I think there are a lot more people than I realize that just don't like Amazon, and so that doesn't necessarily resonate with them. So there's some things there that I would, and I'm not even sure we could have.
But anytime you connect with a company, you got folks that love it and folks that
Correct.
hate it. I mean, that's unfortunately life. And
And we address that in the book, and what we say is,
yeah,
I don't know what you think about Amazon or Bezos. You may love them or hate them.
sure.
I would recommend in looking at this book to put that aside because aren't you curious how they became so successful? And it's hard to argue against their success, right? So even if you don't like them, are there things you can learn from what they did?
Right. And it's not a de facto endorsement of you saying everything they do is perfect, but I think whether you do love them or hate them,
Right.
in most companies, right, unless they're truly evil, there's something to learn, right? And so there's a plus and a minus there, and there is also a risk. I think it's fairly minimal with Amazon that when you tie a book or a piece of content to a specific company,
Right.
if something goes off, if something goes awry at that company. But I think the reality is if you picked up Good to Great
Oh,
today,
come
a
on.
majority of those
Yeah,
companies
not
are
so
are,
great. Yeah, exactly.
not so
Well,
great
and we
anymore.
had a bit of that as we were finalizing the manuscript because Bezos' affair and divorce
Yeah.
were announced, I guess, or just coming out. So, okay, now
Yep.
what do we
Yep.
do? How do we, should we address it? Should we not address it? And we actually, that, we didn't address it directly, but we addressed it in, well, what I said before in terms of love or hate.
Yeah, well, and part of it is that the stuff in his personal life really doesn't have anything to do with the
Right.
principles and the letters and all that stuff. So you can acknowledge it, but I don't think it is.
Right.
First of all,
No
it's at this
question.
point it's yesterday's news. You can acknowledge it, but it doesn't really have a material impact on
Exactly.
on the
Yep.
on the argument that you're making in the book. Well, this has been great. As we wrap up now, Steve, any final words or thoughts or nuggets to those out there thinking of going through a business transformation like you did? Because you've done a stellar job. It's quite remarkable.
Well, I would say the primary thing for one, if you're thinking about writing a book, it's hard and you absolutely should do it. People ask me, what was it like writing a book? And I say, I'm just thrilled to have written a book. So it's work. I would say, two, when you're thinking about the positioning of a book, as an author, you will make very little, if any, money on the book,
Sure.
but you will absolutely make money on what the book makes possible if you strategize well enough with the book.
Well, let's go back to that if though, because that's a massive if. You're not going to make money on the book. If
Yes.
I could recap what you said in terms of number of units sold, some royalty or profit per book times whatever. Nobody would do it for that. That if is a critical if because most people don't think strategically on the front end to think about how it changes the landscape.
And I mean, we included in the book a couple of pages actually of very specifically go here
Yep.
to the website for additional bonus material, go here for the assessment. So we are capturing the lead of the person reading the book if they want a bit more help and information around the book. And then that obviously becomes a mailing list and a stay in touch and right, all of those kinds of things that you can build a business on.
Excellent. Well, this has been phenomenal. I am, first of all, kudos to you because not many people are able to make the transition. And I like that it was thoughtful and it was deliberate and it wasn't a lightning strike of luck. I mean, there's nothing wrong with those, but the fact that you actually thought this through.
Well, there probably is some of that in there, but I believe people make their luck too. So
Yeah, no, no, no. Well, listen, yeah, I'm sure there's some of that, but I think that I admire the strategy underneath it and the deliberateness by which you realized where you were in a marketplace and how do I get out of there and how do I transition to the next one. So great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, and I appreciate it.
my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Peter.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.